it was about training each one of the young artists, both technically in painting, educating them about the art world, but he also really genuinely supported their careers by helping them get solo shows for their own work as well, all that kind of stuff.
Welcome to Bench Talk, the podcast where I dive deep into conversations with inspiring artists to unveil the secrets behind their creativity, along with discussions and behind-the-scenes insights into the realities of building a professional art career. I'm your host, Tom Gerrard, a professional artist from Australia and the co-founder of Art Career Academy, where Claire Bradshaw and I help emerging and established artists build sustainable professional careers. If you'd like to support the show, you can subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend who needs to hear it. This helps us keep the podcast going and is much appreciated. Welcome to the episode of Bench Talk. I'm your host, Tom Gerrard. Today I'm sitting down with the director of Backwoods Gallery here in Melbourne, Byron Bowman Kehoe. How you going, Byron?
G'day, Tom. Not bad, thanks, man. How are you doing?
Yeah, great, thanks. Every time I catch up with you, we have really great chats about the art world and art in general. So I've been really looking forward to sitting down and having this conversation with you.
Yeah, likewise. I've enjoyed the few chats we've had, and it's weird only having met you really in person for the first time, like in the last 3 months since Heroes exhibition, and obviously having seen your work for like 15 or more years, it was kind of weird being like, oh, how have I not talked to this guy after all this time? So
Yeah,
it was really, really good to meet you, and the chats were quality. Appreciated them.
Thanks, mate. Well, one of the things I'm really looking forward to about having you here on the show is to have a different a different type of conversation around the art world. I speak to a lot of artists about making art and then building careers, but it's really good to have a gallerist on the show so I can actually find out about like the other side of the art world, which is more around exhibiting art and selling art and all that type of stuff. So like, I guess we'll start at the start. Like, how did you first get exposed like to art? Like, when did it like really get on your radar and excite you?
I mean, the very earliest recollection that I know of, I don't have any specific memory of it, but my mum, nepotism. I mean, that's really the first interaction I had with art was, yeah, my mum ran a Japanese art gallery that she started in 1981. And my very, very first recollection of ever like falling in love with a piece of art was mum said to each one of us kids, I've got two siblings, and she took us into kind of like the storeroom in the back of her gallery and said we could pick an artwork. I remember I chose I think it was a like late 1800s, early 1900s bronze flower vase of a Japanese demon. This big like mouth open and 3 eyes, and it was a little bronze flower vase that would hang on a wall, usually in a tea ceremony room or somewhere like that. And that was the object that I chose. And I think really from that point onwards, I had an attraction to art. Yeah, that's the earliest. And I think from there, I mean, I think I was maybe 4 or 5 years old when that happened. And I've still got the vase. It's pretty cool. So yeah, that was really my first ever interaction with a piece of art, to the point that I was like, I can take care of this thing now. It's mine. That weird sense of ownership as a little kid was kind of cool. It was just like, I get to look at this thing every day and touch it, and it's mine.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. So being that like there was an art gallery within the family, I take it you spent a lot of time in the galleries like throughout your life?
Yeah, I did. Even to the point that I remember like I ate rat poison once or something in the window of mum's shop in Camberwell when I was really little. So yeah, I mean, dad worked and mum was in the gallery. So as a little kid, I was even, as a baby, was in the gallery all the time while mum was working. But yeah, growing up, I spent a lot of time in the space in Camberwell, and then my mum worked from home for a little while my father was ill, and then eventually she moved to a private gallery in Flinders Lane, and then eventually space in Collins Street. So there was a good chunk of my life where there was a part of home that was like, this is the private gallery area, and clients would come home. And then the same with the space in Flinders Lane. It was a private gallery, ran out of a pretty fancy apartment, I must say. So yeah, it's always been there at home as well. So yeah, unavoidable really. There was art objects around the house plus the gallery ran from home for probably a decade or so, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So it didn't run like a traditional white walls gallery. It was more like by appointment only stock room.
Yeah, well, for
Yeah.
a period. There was the gallery space in Camberwell, then there was a private by appointment experience because, that was the way that my mum did business in the gallery a lot, was it involved a lot of education. It involved a lot of time with people, showing them objects, teaching them about the history, the techniques, all of that sort of stuff. So it worked really well for her to have the by appointment private experience because she could spend more time in conversation with people, teaching them about the works. So that worked really well. And then eventually went to a white wall space at 101 Collins Street in the city in 2000. And I think this took over the space in 2008 and sort of refurbished it and opened in 2010. And that was not a traditional giant white wall space. It had a little bit of inspiration from Japanese architecture, like black wooden floors and some sort of bamboo stuff. And it was not purely traditionally a white wall gallery, but close.
Mm. Yeah. You also spent a chunk of time living in Japan as well, didn't you?
Yeah, yeah. Again, really, really privileged to have had that experience. The first time was when I was probably 13 or so. I lived for maybe 4 months or so in a little town down in the smaller island, Shikoku. I lived in a little place called Imabari with some, I guess you would call, yeah, some family friends. And then, I went to high school for a year in Japan, in Yokohama, when I was 17, between Australian year 11 and 12. And then I had another few periods of living there for like a couple of months. So yeah, it was really lucky. And actually, kind of thinking about it now, I'm glad that I got to do it in the kind of 90s and 2000s. It sounds like the last 5 or 6 years, Japan's changed a lot with the influx of tourists. So I got a pretty wholesome experience, I guess, in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. And being that your mum ran a Japanese themed gallery, and then you spent time in Japan, and then the first artwork you collected was Japanese. Did you see did you start looking at Japanese art differently? Like, was that like your main focus when looking at art? It was what you knew.
It's definitely what I know the most about, like historical Japanese art, just purely because of the level of exposure and time I've spent with it, I would say is where my speciality is. But the thing that Japanese art taught me the most that I think is applicable to my taste in art in general was that I have a little bit more of an appreciation for the technical side of art. I definitely would say it took me a little while to warm up to contemporary art, which is a lot more conceptual. Japanese art really puts a focus on the connection, I guess, between concept and technique. And it was actually through that, the working with Mum and another great curator, and a glass collector, actually, Sandy Benjamin. We curated a show at Mum's Gallery that involved 4 Australian glass artists, and each one of them had some sort of connection or inspiration from Japan. And we were discussing how it would fit in with the gallery, curatorially speaking, because it was predominantly a Japanese art gallery, and how to discuss that. And we came up with the idea of concept, originality, mastery, and technique, pairing those two together to be originality of concept and mastery of technique. And I think that's what Japanese art taught me the most. And using that foundation is how I approach any art that I look at now. Is that's my foundation for beginning to look, is to be like, how unique or original or distinct is the concept or the narrative that this artist is discussing, and then how much of a mastery of their technique do they have. And that's interesting when you start to think about contemporary art, because technique can be literally like piling a bunch of newspapers in the corner of a room and being like, boom, this is about the industrial revolution of Russia in the 1940s or something. So when it comes to that in contemporary art, it's a little bit of a flawed framework, I guess. But generally speaking, that's what Japanese art taught me generally about how to approach art, is those things. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Did you ever like try your hand at art or like go to art school or anything like that?
No, people ask me that all the time, and I think I made a conscious decision around like at the end of high school. I was going to go into an arts degree, but then I thought about it and I thought, hey, I've been pretty privileged in that I've been able to get a pretty great arts education from art collectors. First and foremost was meeting all the clients of Mum's Gallery. And, most of them didn't just collect Japanese art. They had incredible collections of other kinds of art at home. And then traveling, going to museums and things like that and reading books, I was like, man, this is kind of like that's a great arts education. And when I was looking at it, I was like, hey, even my mum speaking to a lot of artists, other gallerists, things like that, how to do business was something that I felt like everybody, I don't want to say lacking, but yeah, I decided to do business basically. It was like, I can get a great arts education without going to university. I thought more valuable for me because I had an intention to move into the business side of art, being a gallerist or artist manager, project manager, what it was. I wanted to bridge the gap between creatives and professional people or business types, be able to speak both languages because I felt like that was something that I noticed was lacking. It was a lot of the time when people were speaking from those two worlds, there was a disconnect. So I wanted to be able to be a translator in a way or a conduit between the business world and the creative world. So I chose to do business.
Yeah.
Yeah. Never studied art other than
Yeah.
reading books. I have a massive collection of books, and that's been my university more than anything was, going to shows, whether it's galleries, museums or whatever. But yeah, consuming books and reading a lot was, my arts degree. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of artists out there that haven't got arts degrees either, and it's you learn things in your own way. In regards of like learning about art in the art world as well, like you spent a chunk of time in New York working as a studio director for a Japanese contemporary artist. I take it that was a massive learning experience for you as well.
Yeah. Huge. This idea of the art world is really interesting. And I went to a lecture a while ago at the Justin Art House Museum, and somebody spoke about the idea of the 1%, the 1% art world, as in like we've gotten used to that term thanks to those Wall Street protest people who's not coming to the top. The name of the group is not coming to, what are they called? The people that were protesting Wall Street years ago that came up with the idea of the 1%.
I'm not sure.
God damn it. I've forgotten. That's terrible.
Yeah.
Anyway, somebody mentioned this term of the 1% art world. And when I heard that term, I was like, oh, I felt like I got to participate in that in New York. The idea of like the upper echelon and the top tier galleries. And I guess that was because this particular artist, that was his intention. He had that intention from the very early days of deciding he was going to become an artist, is that he wanted to leave behind a legacy for his lifetime and have this kind of art career that participated in that top tier. So yeah, coming from Melbourne, Australia, and working in Japanese art, to being exposed to being right in the center of the big bad 1% art world in New York was a huge adjustment. But it was incredibly exciting. Also incredibly cutthroat, and I could talk forever about the experience, but generally it was pretty wild. Huge amount of pressure. The stakes are a lot higher. Just everything about it was kind of intense and overwhelming, but incredibly inspiring and fun at the same time. I was very lucky to be studio director, so I was kind of at the top of an artist who ran a studio system. I think when I was working there, he had a total of 12 people in the studio, myself and him, one admin staff, and then there was probably maybe 9 or 10 painters who worked on his work with him. I think at the moment the studio is getting close to 30 or more people. So it was a pretty interesting thing because the whole studio system, a lot of people have a weird feeling about the idea that artists are not really painting their own work, which is true in some cases, definitely not in the case of this artist. He worked on all of his works. They were all purely done under his guidance, and his participation in every work. And yeah, I was a little bit weird and anti that whole idea of like the studio system, but he explained it to me that, one painting of his, if he was painting it all by himself, would take anywhere from 1 to 2 months to create one painting. And if he continued his lifetime of 20, 30 years of maybe being able to be an artist, he would only be able to create a few hundred works. And you can't leave behind a lasting legacy and participate in that level of the art world without thousands of artworks. So he's like, I need assistance so that I can create more paintings to have that lasting impact that I want. And for a Japanese artist, man, they've had studio systems since way back in the 16th century. All the big Japanese painters, they have schools behind them. There was the Rimpa school, there was the Kano school, and that involved a master and a whole lot of apprentices painting some of, the most important artworks in Japan. So, I guess it's not really too controversial, or in the way that I think a lot of people interpret the studio system to be. Yeah.
I've got no problem with assistance. I think it's different if, like, say, I guess Jeff Koons is like a interesting one, like where he's not so hands on. He's more like a conductor of an orchestra, you know,
Yeah.
and that's still like legitimate in my eyes, because he's coming up with the ideas and then making them happen. They would never happen without him being there. But I've got an assistant that works with me, and like it makes a massive difference having someone help
Yeah.
out. Like there's lots of 2-person jobs. I even, painting murals, I always get people to help me do that. And it's still my artwork. I'm just like, that big area, fill it in green, whatever, otherwise you're going to have to do everything, every single step, so yeah.
It all depends on what kind of studio system you're running. There are all sorts of stories out there about some of those really large artists, paying $2 or $3 an hour and treating it like a sweatshop, and, being like, oh, you have the pleasure of working in my studio and it's going to help your career, so I'm just going to treat you like dog shit and pay you nothing. Horrible. And then there are some artists too that they run studios where they have very little to do with the creation of the artwork, even designing it, choosing the colors, whatever it is. They're completely hands off and they just have a studio system that run it. I don't know how I feel about some of that. It becomes a little bit too commercial. But then there are studios that run more like a team. I think, that was a conscious choice that this artist I worked with in New York made too, is he called the studio a team. And it was about training each one of the young artists, both technically in painting, educating them about the art world, but he also really genuinely supported their careers by helping them get solo shows for their own work as well, all that kind of stuff, and helping them with visas to come from Japan if they were Japanese, all that kind of stuff. And I think that makes the studio system much more wholesome, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it's life-changing for the assistants coming in.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think if you treat it that way, I feel like that's much, it's less commercial and less gross than just literally being like a kind of sweatshop situation where you've just got people that are, just filling in colors and you don't really respect them as individual artists. Yeah. I find that a bit.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's all a level of respect, is very important.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So when did it strike you that you wanted to be like a gallerist and like be selling art and working in that side of things?
To be honest, I actually avoided it for quite a while. There was a period of time when I actively avoided like wanting to work for my mum in the gallery world. For a while, I had an interest of more working directly with artists, helping them with their relationships with galleries or their careers or whatever it was. I guess that was just a little bit of rebellious, I don't know, don't want to be the same as your parents type thing. I don't really know. But there was a period, that kind of changed, I think. Around 2008, I was working as a research analyst for a hedge fund. I'd taken a break from creative stuff for a little bit. and was doing that. And that was awesome. I love just sitting every day researching. And then when the people I was working for were pretty smart and they kind of saw that the whole global financial crisis thing was potentially coming and that there was going to be a pretty bad downturn in the stock market. So they closed up their business. And at that time, Mum was like, I'm looking to open a gallery space. Would you be interested in coming to work for me? And I think shifting to actually having a, four walls and a roof gallery space, and the opportunity came for this incredible space at 101 Collins Street. Yeah, I kind of couldn't say no to that opportunity. And yeah, there was a chance there for me to work with architects to design the space and help kind of build the business from day one, I guess. Well, day one being, the business was 30 years old at that point or something, but day one in a new space with a little bit more of a focus on contemporary art than historical art. Yeah, that was a really exciting opportunity I couldn't say no to. That was when I decided to really be like, okay, let's embrace the family business and become a gallerist. Yeah, it was then probably 2008 to 2010.
Yeah. And was it exciting when you sold your first piece of artwork, or did it mean more to you when you went out on your own and then sold your first piece of artwork?
Good question. I actually try to think of the first time I ever sold a piece of art was. I mean, that's interesting. I mean, since I was a little kid, I was always a little bit of a wheeler and dealer. I ran a business selling trading cards, and my father was an engineer full time, and in his spare time used to buy a lot of, furniture and things. He was one of those people that could walk into a room and find a coin in a jar and know that it was worth a fortune and who he could sell it to. He had that kind of brain. So I ran some businesses buying and selling trading cards and action figures. So I guess I kind of already had a bit of sales experience in a way. I actually think the first time I remember being pretty impressed about selling an artwork was really the first time I was involved in a major acquisition to a huge international museum. I think that was the first time that I ever went, wow, like, yeah, it was a very expensive piece of art by a living Japanese artist that went to probably one of the biggest museums in the world based in New York. Being involved in that process was the first time that I think I ever felt like I really sold an artwork with meaning, I guess. Yeah. And that was huge. Going through that process of first a collector falling in love with the work and then saying that, hey, I really want to put this in front of this particular curator. I think this is incredible work. And then working with the collector, the curator, the museum, obviously gallery, artist, a huge amount of people involved in that process. Getting to the end of that and then physically going one day and seeing that artwork on display in the museum was incredibly satisfying. And having that level of support from a collector was massive. People don't talk about how important collectors are enough. Collectors are like the center of everything that happens in the art world. They are key. People always say museums are the things that, and curators that change everything for an artist, but really collectors are the people who make the biggest impact in the art world, in my opinion. And yeah, seeing that happen through that particular sale, that was really gratifying. And yeah, that was when I realized that collectors are way more important than potentially they're given credit for.
Yeah,
but yeah, that was the first time I felt like I sold an artwork, if that makes sense. Sold it into a place where it's going to be for hundreds of years, and it's like, I don't know, working with artists and art, that's the kind of thing that you'd be like, whoa, like that's massive, that's really cool. Just to be a part of something like that happening. So yeah.
Because I guess there's like different levels of art, and it's like you're seeing like art that is important to, like, I guess the scene and the community that it's in, and it goes and it's going into people's homes and it's sort of it's decoration, but for serious collectors as well. But then this is like taking it to a museum where it's going to be historically relevant. It's entering like art history, more or less.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like next
yeah,
level.
it's next level,
Mm.
and collectors and galleries are where that kind of stuff begins. But I also think for some artists, not every artist, but a lot of artists, they have that intention and that's where they want to be. Getting pieces into major museums is kind of like, the ultimate goal, because then your work is going into an institution where it's going to be recorded and hopefully displayed. But it does become a part of art history in that way, but also it becomes exposed to people and the public on a level that you can't necessarily achieve by yourself or in a gallery. I think getting works into a museum is a huge achievement for an artist, and it feels different in a way than just going to a collector's home. You did mention the word decoration, and in a way, there are collectors that purely buy artwork for decoration. There are some who purchase it because they have intentions to maybe donate it to a museum at the end of their lifetime. They collect for academic reasons. It's not always just decoration.
Yeah, I know that was
Yeah.
This is a sweeping term.
Yeah, sweeping statement. Yeah,
And
100%.
I didn't
Yeah.
mean it to any disrespect to art out there, but I know I like
Yeah.
to hang art on my walls at home, and my studio
Yeah.
is covered in art, and I collect lots of art from artists who I love because and it is more than decoration, but decoration is like a part of it because
Yeah. I
but
guess,
it brings me joy on multiple levels.
I
Yeah.
was going to say there's
Mm.
decoration for pure aesthetics, to be like, oh, that painting's got blue in it and it matches my blue rug. And then there's decoration in the way that you described, that it brings me joy, or it's a reminder of a really great person or interaction that you had with an artist or a gallerist or a friend or whoever it was. The art can be a really nice reminder of something that brings you joy. And, not always joy. I was actually having a conversation with an artist recently who'd released some artworks that were a little bit spicy and told a story about their personal life in a humorous but sort of dark way. And I was like, yeah, man, art should talk about things like rage and frustration and anger and sadness a little bit more. So sometimes artwork can be a reminder of something dark, and it's okay. It's good to have art around that reminds you that it's okay to be sad or depressed or angry sometimes as well. It doesn't always have to be joy.
Mm. Yeah. And I was talking about talking to a gallerist the other night, and my friend was telling her that I was mugged in South America, like multiple times actually.
Yeah, I
She's
remember
like,
you telling me that story at dinner. Like,
yeah,
crazy story.
but
Yeah.
her response was, "Oh, that'll be great. You got plenty of trauma to pour into your artwork."
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think I mentioned this before, even to you, and probably I think I talk about it a lot. But Alain de Botton, the philosopher, has a really great, simple little video that's online. You can Google it, and it's called "What Is Art For?" And he explains sort of 6 main reasons that art exists and what it's for, culturally or sociologically speaking. And one of the things he said is to remind people that dark feelings are a part of the human experience. And there are some incredibly dark and haunting paintings out there. But I don't know. Sometimes when I look at darker artwork that's discussing some of these darker feelings, I always feel, a level of comfort in that, because we have those feelings and those experiences, and art can remind us that other people share it and it's okay. I think certainly in our culture, we're kind of grown up to smile and carry on through the dark times and not really talk about that. So I think art is a really great opportunity to speak about some of those things. And I think people should do it more often. Art doesn't always have to be happy and joyful. I think it's a constant reminder that we all go through shitty, dark times as well. And so having a huge amount of trauma to throw into a painting, I think that's really important. I think artists should do a little bit more of exploring some darker side of things, because there's a huge amount in comfort in sharing with other people the fact that we all go through that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like with art, there's something for everyone. It's like music as well. Like people, it's like people will go to big art galleries and museums and stuff, and if they're not completely like immersed in the art world, they feel like they must have to like it all because it's good enough to get into these buildings. And and they said, "Oh, look, I went there and I didn't really like everything I saw. I liked a few things and everything." It's like, you don't have to like it all. It's like going to like a massive music festival with 150 bands playing and saying you're going to like every single thing you hear. It's just not the case, you know. And
Mm,
there's genre, and like what someone may hate, another person would love, and it's just, you know.
definitely.
And
I
I feel it's even with the dark pieces there. There's people out there that just absolutely love them, you know.
Yeah, I heard a really interesting quote from just some sort of influencer on an Instagram reel recently, and they were talking about going to the NGV in Melbourne, and I can't remember the name of the painting off the top of my head, which is really terrible, because it's one of my favorite paintings at the NGV. It's the one of like a sheep, a parent sheep with a sort of dead, I guess, sort of their child sheep in front of them, and there's a ton of birds around the dead body, and it sort of looks like the sheep's crying to, you know, for help or sadness or whatever it is. And it's incredibly dark and haunting painting. But this influencer was talking about the fact that every time they go to the NGV and walk past this painting, they feel something different about the painting. And a lot of the time, I think that's quite true, in that when you look at art, depending on how you're feeling, the painting mirrors back to you a lot of what you're experiencing at that time. So yeah, every time you go visit the same artwork, you can have a different response or feeling to it based on what's going on in your own life. And I think that's pretty true, especially with some of those darker paintings. Sometimes, yeah. And I think that, again, that's a little bit of sorry, I'm rambling, but I think that's the key to what a good artwork is when, you know, you stand in front of it multiple times and you feel something or experience something different. I feel like that's a little bit more of a successful artwork than some. You can certainly look at some paintings every time and just be like, nah, I've seen it 20 times and I still hate it, or, you know, I've seen it 100 times and I still love it. And that sometimes, depending on what's going on in your own life, you can spend time with an artwork and feel a different way about it, which I think is a cool thing about art and music. Same way. And yeah, music's a great example. I mean, I listen to a lot of like pretty dark, disgusting, you know, heavy metal music, and some people just look at me like, "What the hell? Like, how do you listen to that? That's awful." But, you know, it just tickles something inside me that, yeah, I enjoy. So yeah, you shouldn't love every piece of art, but yeah, you should always consume and give it a chance,
Mm.
I think.
Yeah. And just adding
Yeah.
on to that, I feel that the more you learn about an artist, you can come back to works that you previously, you know, just walked straight past and then see them with fresh eyes and go, now I understand this artist a lot more, and I see how this artwork fits within their life in art, and it completely makes sense. You know,
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Some people say that you shouldn't need to. You should be able to walk past a piece of art and feel something, some sort of connection to it without having to know all the stuff about the artist. But I don't necessarily agree with that, especially in today's idea of contemporary art, where the idea, story, concept, narrative, whatever word you want to use, is the key to understanding the art. So you do need to learn a little bit about it before passing judgment. I mean, I use that stupid example of like a piled up piece of newspaper in the corner of a room can be a piece of contemporary art. And you can look at it and just be like, well, cool, that's a bunch of newspaper screwed up in the corner of a room. It has no meaning until you understand what the message or the intention is. And some people say that that's not a successful piece of art. If you do have to go to that level of learning all of that information to then appreciate and understand the work, that's not successful. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's fun. I think you can go past that pile of newspaper in the corner of the room and you can be like, okay, I don't care. Or you can be like, why? Why is it in this particular corner? Why is it in the southwest corner, not the northeast corner? And what year is the newspaper? What language is the newspaper in? You can start to question things that lead you on a path of discovery. And then, you know, I think that's a successful piece of art, as long as you got that inquisitive nature to want to understand why. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Because I found that, like, during my 20s, I did a lot. Spent a lot of time traveling and 30s, and I was traveling around Europe a lot and going to all the big art museums, and spent a lot of time in America as well. And just everywhere I was going, I'd go into these big art museums and look at art, but I didn't really. Wasn't resonating with me. I was still sort of in the graffiti mindset. Like my mind was just fixated on that as all I knew, and I was lacking art education. And I was hoping to gain
Mm,
more art education from these places, but which I did to an extent, but it was only once I'd made a concise like effort to educate myself on art, and I was like working at Christie's, laying out the catalog, so I was immersed in it,
yeah.
and then I was watching YouTube videos on art and lots of documentaries, and really educating
Hmm.
myself on who these artists are and how the art world works and all that type of stuff. I would then go into these same galleries, look at the same artworks, and they hit me so much harder. Having being
Hmm.
informed, it just made a world of difference, you know. And it's not to say that I wouldn't see an artwork for the first time and fall in love with it,
Yeah.
prior to knowing who did it. Like that still happens all the time. That's always happened. But there was more artworks that didn't essentially resonate with me really started to resonate with me the more I understood
Mm.
where they fit within the art world and who made it and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, I think you made an interesting. I mean, dude, that's incredible experience working for Christie's designing catalogs. Like, damn, like what a cool experience and way to expose yourself to a shit ton of interesting artwork. And I think that's an interesting thing. Is you've used two words there, like educate and expose. I feel like, we're both similar in that way that we exposed ourselves to as much art as we possibly could, but then also a little bit of education, but self-education rather than listening to, a professor in a lecture hall. We went and consumed the art and then also read and you watch YouTube videos and all that kind of stuff. But I think there's an interesting distinction there between exposing yourself to art and educating yourself about art. I think exposing yourself to art is an incredibly important thing. Is just going to museums, going to shows, reading books, looking on Instagram. Exposing yourself to a huge amount of art does help you formulate your own opinions and gather an understanding about art. You don't necessarily have to educate yourself. Exposure can be enough for you to start to tap into some of those things, and you just start to learn your own way to consume and learn about art. But yeah, I think that's a valid way of learning or educating yourself about art in general, is just to expose yourself to art constantly all the time. I know that doesn't work for everybody, especially other artists. Some artists get overwhelmed looking at other art that's similar or in general, because I don't know, for their own whatever reason, sometimes they feel like, oh, I'm never going to be good enough if I, looking at some of these other artists, or like, damn, that idea that I had for a series of work has already been done before, and that kind of thing. But I think generally, yeah, I think everyone should be exposing themselves to art, whether, you're an artist, a gallerist, like anyone that wants to be involved in the world, you should be constantly exposing yourself to as much art as you possibly can. And thank God for the internet, because we can do it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a great point. Like I know I personally expose myself to as much art as possible, and there's things that like I don't really like that. I'll make sure that thing never creeps into my art, or I really like this, and how can I get this little bit? You end up making like a soup of all this stuff that you really love, and that essentially becomes you as an artist. But if you're only really looking at two different artists, you're going to look like a mixture of those two artists with something else thrown in there. But
Yeah.
I feel the where like as I say, nothing's original, and we all like get inspired from different things. But I think it's also really important to have inspiration outside of the art world. And I feel that when you look at places where no one's looking and start to be influenced by that and bring that into your art, that's when you really come up with original stuff, like just new combinations of ways of doing things and ways of outputting ideas. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned your story before about getting mugged in South America. I remember when you told me that story, the first thing you were describing a particular scene, and it was really like quite confronting. I was like, holy shit, Tom, like you went through that? I remember saying to you, I'm like, paint that. Yeah, I think that you're right in that a lot of the sources for an artist, to put into their own work. I think a lot of that comes from outside of art. I think the points you were making before about taking inspiration from as many sources as possible, I think that helps in terms of composition, colors, painting techniques, other stuff. That's really great, but I do think that there's a lot of an artist's personal life experience completely outside of their art that it translates really well should translate really well into their work. I think that saying always gets attributed to Picasso as like, great artist steal or whatever it is. I don't think actually he was the original one to say it. That's terrible. I can't remember that. But yeah, I
He
don't think
stole
there's
the
anything
quote.
wrong. Yeah, he stole the quote. Yeah, was it like good art? It's something like good artists copy, great artists steal, or something like that. It's terrible. I can't remember it. But yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with that at all. I think that taking inspiration from other artists throughout history is integral to creating art. Obviously, you want to, like you said, steal from so many people that it's unrecognizable that you're stealing from one particular person. You should be inspired by everybody. I really don't think it's great when artists mimic their heroes too closely. You do see a lot of that happening. And, I don't think there's anything wrong with that if you're aware of it and you acknowledge it. I don't think there's anything wrong with kind of mimicking your masters to a point. I think you can do it for a certain period of time, but you have to then make a decision to be like, okay, cool. Like I've done that long enough. I feel like I've learned what I can. Now I need to do something wholly original. I don't really think it's that bad to be really heavily inspired by other artists.
Yeah, I think it's where we all start. It's like I've heard it be called like
Yeah.
the emulation phase, and it's been
Yeah.
compared to say playing the guitar. Like when you learning to play a guitar, you learn a few notes, but then you start playing like a Led Zeppelin song or whatever.
Yeah,
You
you
don't
learn everyone learns how to play Smoke on the Water. Like,
exactly. You don't start like just writing your own music and just playing something completely original. It's the same with art. You start mimicking people, and then you break
Mhm.
out of that, and then transcend that level of art and find your own way.
Yep.
Mm.
Yep. I think that's really true. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That's a cool way to put it, the emulation phase. I think every artist should have an emulation phase. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, artists, listen up. If you're committed to your art career, you're done with waiting for opportunities to kind of magically find you, and you're ready to start to actually build a sustainable career from a strategic lens, then we've got something for you. Tom and I are going to be running the Going Pro Bootcamp over 3 days. It's completely free, and we're going to be starting on Tuesday, the 10th of February. We're going to be covering things like vision, voice, and visibility. Basically, these are the things that you need to go from a place of feeling a bit stuck, scattered, unsure of in your art career to a place of more clear confidence. And this is the exact same framework that we have used to help our community to land solo gallery shows, to secure 5-figure commissions, to land media opportunities and build their sustainable careers. And you can access all of this for free. So all you need to do is head to artcareeracademy.com/3-day bootcamp or click the link in the notes to save your spot. Let's make 2026 your year for your art career. Let's get back to the episode.
The artists that you work with, and then we're talking about like, the museum level of art. Do you like sort of do you see artists who you feel are moving towards that area, or do you think that to get into the museum world it have to be highly intentional, or do you think can just happen for an artist through like popularity?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think there are plenty of artists out there who have that intention and they're never going to get there. You can have the intention, but the work has to match. And there is a certain amount of playing the game in a way. to meet certain standards to qualify in a way. What they are is probably another 2 hour long podcast to go through the specifics. But no, I do think that, as I mentioned before, collectors play a huge part. I think that there are definitely opportunities where there has to be a third party involved to pluck an artist out of obscurity and put them in front of someone. The term I use is someone who makes art important, be that a museum curator. There are definitely artists that have no intention of that, and their work is just catches the attention of the right person that can then make the introductions and stuff like that. There are, stories of a curator stumbling across an artist just online or something like that purely themselves and, being like, holy shit, I see something in this art that is valuable and I'm willing to put my name behind it and take the risk to put them into my museum or a show at my museum, even though they've not ticked all of the normal boxes. I don't think you have to have the intention to be that kind of artist. Yeah, I think it can happen. It can happen through the influence of a third party, but yeah, the work's got to be good. When I say that, I do think that as an artist, though, you have to be able to talk about your work to get the attention of someone like a museum. You have to understand your work. A curator can come directly to you, a whoever it may be, but if you're not able to clearly articulate what the intention behind your work is, that's probably the one thing that I think would affect you from not being able to reach that level, whether you're aspiring to reach it or not. If you can't eloquently talk about what your work is about, it doesn't have to be talk. You could write a poem about it. You could whatever, but just having some way to communicate what your work is about, that's key. If you're not able to do that, then you're most likely never going to reach that point.
Yeah. So back to you and your world. Like how did Backwoods come into the picture for you?
I was thinking about this a lot recently. It was like, when was the earliest memory that I have of ever hearing about Backwoods? And the earliest thing I can think of my experience with the physical space and coming to the gallery was the Kami and Sasu exhibition in 2010 or 11. The very, very first time that I heard about I don't know. I had some like friends and stuff at the time, like around 2008, 9, 10, that were sort of involved with Backwoods. And yeah, I don't remember exactly when it came up, but my first memory of going to the physical gallery space was to see the Kami and Sasu exhibition. I had learned about them when I was living in Japan in 2001. The school that I went to was on the same train line as a pretty infamous wall in Japan, which is called the Sakuragicho Wall, which is like almost a kilometer long wall under a train station on the Keihin to Hoku line that ran between Tokyo and Yokohama. And I went to school at the end, the very last station of this train line. But 2 stations after where I lived on the same train line was Sakuragicho Station and the wall. And I used to go there all the time after school and just watch people doing, pasties, throw-ups, painting huge murals, whatever it was. And I learned a little bit about the Japanese graffiti scene, and Kami and Sasu were sort of considered to be mum and dad of the whole scene at that time. And then, yeah, finding out that they had a show in Melbourne, I was like, what the hell? Like, how? So yeah, that was the first experience of the space. And I worked with the curator director back then on the first show of Shohei Otomo's work at Mum's Gallery in Collins Street. So 2011, 12, I kind of was floating around Backwoods a lot because there were some incredible young Japanese artists. A few I knew, most of them I didn't know. And then, yeah, like kind of didn't really get involved in the scene of Backwoods much. I was a big collector of the gallery. I bought a lot online and, went into the gallery kind of in clandestine every now and then and bought a piece. And then, yeah, after coming back from working in New York, it was actually Hiro Yasasuri, the Backwoods artist, who I'd gotten to know really well since, I don't know, however long. And Hiro was like, hey, there's some some change going on at Backwoods, and it was the transition between my two predecessors, Sean Carroll and Tom Grove. Sean was stepping back and Tom was taking over, and Hero was like, hey, would you get involved helping Tom at Backwoods? Backwoods is really important to Hero's career, and he was like, hey, what are you doing since you got back from New York? Get involved. And I hesitated for a while because I wasn't sure I wanted to work in a gallery again. And then, hung out with Sean and Tom and was like, man, these guys are really cool. And, I love Backwoods. I started working officially with Tom like a week or two before we went into lockdown, I'm pretty sure. Roa was here from Belgium and we were about to open Roa's show and then went into lockdown. So I ended up working with Tom all the way through all of that up until when he was ready to transition into something else. And I took over Backwoods like July 2024. And when I say take over, I hate using those words. It's literally, even when you say director of Backwoods, I feel weird about that. It's, I don't feel, a custodian. I like the word custodian. I'm currently sort of, the one at the helm of Backwoods. And that's the short version of how Backwoods came into my history. The biggest reason why I kind of love Backwoods so much was it was the first gallery that I ever really saw Australian art that I liked. I know that sounds terrible. There's a lot of incredible Australian art out there, but I had a little bit of a disconnect to it because my experience and education was with Japanese art, and then even going overseas, you don't really see a presence of Australian art at all. Internationally, it's certainly changing now, which is awesome. But 10 or more years ago, we were sort of non-existent in the international art worlds. I didn't have a lot of love for Australian art. Backwoods was the first place that I was like, I really started to see art that I liked. And that was a reason why I wanted to get involved too, because I felt like there was a story about an art movement in a way that was unique and important that sprung out of what was happening in that particular area in Melbourne. I think that, Backwoods has got a really interesting history and story beyond just the art and the artist, is that I do think it's got something to say about Melbourne as a place in general. That's it. I mean, it was really the first time I fell in love with local art from Melbourne was going to Backwoods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was chatting to you a while back, and you were saying that, the fact that Backwoods has such a history within showing street artists and artists who worked a lot on the streets is really important to you, and you want to continue to fly the flag for that. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
I mean, generally, I always liked graffiti and street art as art. I was never really involved in that world. I really only consumed it as from an artistic perspective. I really liked it as a cultural movement, originally, graffiti particularly being such a big part of a lot of things that I loved, like hip hop culture and all of that. And I really like the idea of, writing your name on a wall. I mean, jumping past all of that to where we are now, the thing that has intrigued me the most is I think that the style of mark making that people who paint outdoors make and their creativity and ingenuity in the tools that they use to make mark is something that really interests me as a curator / collector / art douchebag. That idea that, I hear graffiti writers say if they're doing a piece of, like an illegal tag somewhere in public of being like, oh, damn, I'm walking past, there's this great spot. I've got like instantaneous 10 seconds to pull a marker out, do a thing, get it and escape. That quick thinking and response to a moment in time to create a piece of art, I find really intriguing. But then talking to mural painters, graffiti writers, and street artists is being like, rocking up to a wall and being like, damn, the surface is uneven. There's a window I didn't know about. There's a security camera. There's pipes. There's this, there's that. And then having to make on the spot decisions to alter a composition or make marks using the tools that you physically brought with you, and the problem solving that it involved in adjusting a composition to suit that wall, and then making tools to reach a spot to jam some paint into this hole because there's a hole in a wall, whatever it is. All of that thinking, and a lot of that done on the fly really quickly, all of that translated into a studio practice is incredibly fascinating to me. I see what a lot of artists that Backwoods works with, what they're doing in the studio, or the way that they're thinking about how to create works for a gallery or a studio, or in their studio practice. I find all of that stuff incredibly interesting and intriguing, and I think that it's creating a new style of art that really hasn't been defined or discussed too heavily. There are a lot of great contemporary artists like Barry McGee is a great example of someone who evolved from being Twist all the way through to being Barry McGee and adapted his style of art to suit both worlds, or he carried over what he learned outdoors into what he's doing in the big bad contemporary art world. There are plenty of other examples, but yeah, I think that there's something really interesting in what people who paint outdoors are starting to do in the studio. And I also think that there's a really valid place for them to exist within the contemporary art world because they're so experimental. Even though they're outdoor painters, they all have a natural curiosity to explore new mediums as well. Like, I find a lot of street artists are like, I want to play with plaster, ceramics, metalwork, 3D printing, digital animation. Like, there is a natural curiosity, I think, that exists in a lot of people who paint outdoors to express what they want to express through any way possible. And there's a curiosity to work and experiment with all sorts of different materials and techniques that I think doesn't really exist in traditional artists in a way, who are just like, oh, I learned to paint and now I sit in a studio and I paint. Their curiosity is sort of defined within the world of painting. I don't really see that with a lot of outdoor painters. I see the curiosity to be much more broad, and that fascinates me. Yeah. And from a sort of businessy technical side, I have heard a lot of artists talk about the fact that for them to have enough money to exist in the world, having to include outdoor painting has been a way for them to financially do well. And I think that's something maybe a little bit more particular to Australia, maybe even Victoria, that the EOI's expression of interest for public murals has been a pretty robust industry for a lot of artists. So there were a lot of people who had no intention of painting outdoors that came out of, a VCA fine arts course or a fine arts course from one of our major universities and taught themselves to paint outdoors because it was a way to earn money. And I think that's also valid. And I think that's created a really interesting thing that's happened in Australia and, well, from my context, more Melbourne. There was somebody who spoke about this, one of Australia's, who was it? Somebody spoke about this on a podcast with ABC, that it challenged a lot of the street artists as well to up their painting skills, because there were people coming out of VCA who were not street artists, who had traditional painting skills, who were painting outdoors. So there was this interesting crossover where they were sort of sharing and learning from each other. And then, seeing that come together now in a lot of these artists' gallery works and studio practice, I think there's something emerging now that's going to be really important and prominent in the next decade or so, that there's a style of art that exists there that's kind of new and interesting and unique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, as a someone who paints murals, I feel that I've had to up my game as well to compete in that space. It used to be like, you could do like a graffiti style piece, but then make it not letters, but paint it in that with that same aesthetic. It can be a mural and you can get paid for it, but then over time, it's like you can't get away with that anymore. You got to up your game because you look at the other people out there doing it, and as you said, you have all these fine artists coming in to the mural space. So now I've actually thinking more about like how would I paint a studio work on the street, and it's actually taken my my murals to the next
interesting.
level. I feel,
Cool.
Mm.
Yeah, I think there is like it should be kind of full circle. Is what you learn in the studio should go out to the street, and what you learn in the street should come back to the studio. I think there's a pretty interesting relationship there for sure. And yeah, I mean, I think you're a great example of that being true. And Hero, Megs, there's a few people, Georgia Hill, like yeah, there's lots of people I work with, and when I hear them talk, I can see that coming full circle. That they're practicing things in the studio to help them outdoors and vice versa. And yeah, I think that's something pretty unique to these artists and that world. And yeah, I mean, Backwoods has been one of the places that has celebrated that style of work. And yeah, I see it evolving and in the artist work. And yeah, some of the things that are happening at Backwoods at the moment in terms of the way that we're thinking about the gallery's future is having to grow alongside some of these changes. And yeah, I feel and hear from a lot of these artists that, as they're getting older, things are changing in that outdoor mural space. The opportunities are becoming different. And also, yeah, a lot of them are thinking differently in that they've kind of grown up in a way. Physically, they're older, but like they've grown up in a sense of being like, oh, even like you were mentioning that you were a graffiti boy, but you were still going into all these museums and stuff like that. I think, yeah, that's a lot of these artists are realizing that the world they want to be a part of now as they've grown is, yeah, they want galleries to be a part of what they do when maybe earlier on they may not have thought that way. I think that's changing a little bit in that they're like, oh, we still want to paint outdoors. We still want to be part of that. But one of the things that is a part of what we do is working in the quote unquote art world of galleries, art fairs, like whatever. Yeah, I think that's something that's happening. Yeah.
Yeah. From like an artist point of view, I know lots of artists want to hear from you about like when wanting to contact a gallery, like say an artist wants to show with Backwoods, like what would you recommend would be the best way for them to go about getting in touch with galleries? Because it seems to be this real sensitive topic where you have a lot of people say, don't bother contacting galleries. They don't want to hear from you. They'll find you if they want to show you. But then it's like,
Yeah.
if you sit around waiting for decades to be discovered, like what do you recommend is the best way for an artist to go about that?
I mean, if I'm talking about me personally and Backwoods, I mean, yeah, it's a tough one. There's a million ways to do it, and I think there is no one rule. I think so much of this comes down to what the artist is comfortable with. You can't necessarily, I can tell an artist there's all these different ways to do it, but some of that might be too much for their personality. The number one thing that I do say to a lot of people is physically go to the gallery and speak to someone. I know that's hard if you're trying to chase up a gallery that's interstate or overseas. If you have the means to go and do it, physically going to introduce yourself to a gallery is the best way because we can't ignore you. If you physically walk into Backwoods and say, hi, I'm such and such it's really hard for me to be like, no, I'm not going to look at your work. I'm not going to have a conversation with you because you're physically in front of me. That's the best way to do it. But for a lot of people, that's too difficult. So yeah, I mean, writing emails, sending DMs, all that kind of stuff, posting something in the mail. There are a million ways to do it. You have to find what's comfortably personal for you. And I think that's, yeah, I mean, an artist has to choose what's comfortable for them and what they can actually manage. And if they can't do it at all, it's good to get a third party to go and do that on your behalf, whether that's a manager, even a friend, another artist who's got comfortable to do that for you. But whatever way you choose to do it, I personally think that the best way to get a gallery's attention is to have a well thought out and put together body of work or exhibition. Because usually when you're approaching a gallery, and the main function of a gallery is to host a solo show for an artist that they want to work with. So if that's why a gallery wants to work with you, then that's what you present to them. Present to them a solo show exhibition idea. And that doesn't have to be a fully completed body of work, but a really solid, well thought out exhibition. So that includes the title, how many works are going to be in there, what the show is about, even some sketches of the works, or you've looked at their gallery space and you've given them a floor plan idea of like, I want to have a painting over here and a sculpture there, whatever it is. The more detail and the more information you can put together around a solo show idea, that's what you should communicate to a gallery, because it lessens the amount of work they have to do to decide whether they can work with you or not. Like, I really think that's the key. And however you share that is up to each individual artist. You can do a PDF, you could do a video presentation, you could record a short video like this and send it in. It doesn't matter the way you present it, but that's what you should be presenting. Most of the contact that I get from artists is like, oh, I love your gallery. Your curatorial program's awesome. I really want to work with you. Here's my website. And it's like, okay, cool. Like, I don't, that's too much work for me then to look at it, decide all this stuff. If I get an email that's like, hi, I have this solo show idea. It's called this. There's going to be 12 paintings in it and 2 sculptures. It's going to be about this. If I get all that information, it's easier for me to make a decision whether or not that works for my gallery or not. So presenting a fully thought out and developed solo show idea is what you should do. How you present that, purely up to you.
Thanks for taking the time today, because this has been a very informative chat. Oh, you've left me with a lot to think about, which is really good.
Yeah, I hope it's been useful. I feel like sometimes I ramble too much, and I don't know how useful half the stuff I'm saying is, but yeah, I really enjoy sharing my general thoughts about stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think Melbourne's a really exciting city. We've got so much attention for sport and music, and I think that in the future, Melbourne's going to be really highly regarded as a city for art. The NGV is doing a pretty good job at putting us on the map. They've been showing some incredible international exhibitions that are of the highest international standard. So yeah, I think Melbourne's got a pretty interesting future. I think we're going to become a city for art over the next decade or so. And yeah, I'm pretty excited to be the tiniest little part of that. So yeah, I enjoy talking about this stuff. And yeah, I want everybody in Melbourne and Australia in general to keep up the good fight, because we've got a lot of really interesting things to say through art.
Yeah. And finally, if people want to follow Backwoods and find them online, like, where's the best place for them to check you out?
At backwoods.gallery on Instagram is probably the main source, and backwoods.gallery, no .com, no .com.au, just www.backwoods.gallery. That's our website, which has been a 3-year-long project of just getting everything to do with Backwoods up online. Feels like 1998 to be proud of launching a website, but we're a few weeks away from launching a new website that so far has got 5 years worth of the history and another 10 years or so coming over the next couple of months. So yeah, check out our website over the next couple of weeks. It's pretty exciting to finally put the full 15 years of history up onto the gallery's website. So yeah, over the next few months, keep checking the website out. It's going to be slowly uploaded with all 15 years worth of artworks, exhibition, everything is getting added. So yeah, check it out. We're pretty happy with it. And if anyone's got any feedback, you want to tell me how much the website sucks and how we can improve it, please do. I'm very excited to to get that thing up and running and be useful for collectors and artists and just general people who want to learn about all the art and artists we've shown over the last 15 years.
Thanks for tuning in today. If you love this episode, I'd really appreciate you sharing it with an artist friend who needs to hear it. Word of mouth is how we reach more creatives like you. And if you're ready to take the next step in your art career, head to the show notes and grab our free resources. They're designed to help you build momentum and clarity on your creative path. Until next time, keep creating.